Hello and good morning and welcome to our first RegTalk. We hope this will be first of many. I'm Jeff Harvey, the head of growth at Foureyes Financial, and I'll be your host today. We are joined by over 140 guests from across Canada, the United States, and England, representing wealth management firms, regulators, compliance leaders, research firms, and technology providers. Today's topic is the future of regulatory technology, and I think there's no surprise this is a timely topic given the industry's most recent implementation of client-focused reforms, which we'll refer to as CFRs. The CFRs has been a bit of a wake-up call for the current state of technology and perhaps a calling card for reevaluating how wealth firms are integrating front, mid, and back office technologies. Our format today will be a 30-minute discussion with our panelists, followed by a 10-minute look at the Foureyes Intelligent Compliance Platform. We've got some incredibly knowledgeable panelists, and I know the next 45 minutes is going to fly by. Before we jump in, for those of you not familiar with Foureyes Financial, we are a Canadian-based, globally focused RegTech company helping wealth firms scale their business. The Foureyes Intelligent Compliance Platform automates head office and compliance workflows and provides digital solutions for advisors to manage and meet their KYC, product, and suitability obligations. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce today's guests. We have Christina Suarez from Align Capital Partners. Christina is a true compliance practitioner, having worked in both MFDA and IROC environments. We have Cass Litwin. Cass is the CCO of Investment Planning Council's MFDA business. Like Christina, Cass has real-line experience and recently led the combined CFR integrations for IPC's IROC and MFDA platforms. And finally, we have Sean Shore. Sean is familiar to many of you. He has spent many years in the CCO seat and now consults with industry on regulatory matters. Today's topic, the future of regulatory technology. I think there is a little bit of a consensus that investment in compliance technology has lagged the investment of front office solution. I think a lot of people have felt those pain points over the last year. You have a lot of organizations running macros, single purpose software, and separate processes to meet the regulatory requirements. We believe CFRs have shaken up the industry's thinking about how technology is integrated, particularly when it comes to alignment around KYC, KYP, and suitability responsibilities, whether at the dealer or the advisor level. As regulators continue to push and change rules, there's going to be a business case for firms to not only prioritize investment in compliance technologies to scale, but also how organizations integrate compliance across the customer journey. With that set up, let's get started with our first question. So, Christina, our two firms have been on a bit of a journey transforming compliance and the advisor experience. Do you mind sharing a bit about this initiative and particularly about the strategy to adopt a platform approach for operationalizing data across your organization?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks first for having us here today, and to everyone on the call for tuning in. When I first joined Aligned, I think what stood out to me as I walked into a compliance strategy, compliance technology strategy specifically, that was well in motion. And as you mentioned, our companies worked closely together and have been working closely together to develop a digital ecosystem that really aligns the views of compliance supervisors, compliance head office staff, advisors, and ultimately clients when it comes to risk. So we have been working together, as I mentioned, and we worked together to develop the supervision platform called Risk7. And Align's actually been using Risk7 since Q4 of 2019. And Risk7 really has allowed us to streamline common compliance functions where we're utilizing the system to clear, if you will, trades that present minimal risk to the business. And this has really allowed or created bandwidth within our supervisors and compliance staff in conducting supervision, in that it allows or enables us to focus on greater areas of the business or areas of the business that present greater areas of risk. So that's created efficiencies for us. It's also enabled us to take a portfolio approach to suitability as opposed to an account level based on client level information. So that's using one set of KYC information for a client to assess suitability on a multiple account basis. So that's been transitional for us, and really has allowed us to take a more holistic approach, and has been very well received, from our field from that respect. A big part of the strategy is really based on the data management. And in 2018, Align implemented our own data lake. And that's really been the foundation for us having solid data as it relates to what's being collected, what's being recorded, and ultimately, reported on those essential key pieces of data. And so Risk 7 is actually data driven and is, driving information into the system based off of our data lake. And that's really provided us with that, as we say here, one source of truth with respect to, key KYC product suitability information that's driving through the system. So this has, as I said, really been especially key too, with us being able to align our processes and information as it relates to KYC, KYP, and suitability. And so from a CFR perspective, I think it has been quite natural, and from our progression to then build out that view, or continue working with your firm to build out the view of for the advisors into the same information that we have been working off of. So I think it's created lots of efficiencies from that perspective, and continuing to build out features and utilize key functionality with the system to really change the game of suitability by looking at things, technically from a pre-trade analysis, ultimately versus post-trade, where we conduct supervision today.
I was wondering, maybe you could comment on, because I think when we started our journey, your Aligned had about 180 advisors, and now you're, I think, at 350.
Somewhere around there.
And continuing. Maybe talk a little bit about what kind of resources you've had to add to that whole suitability oversight perspective, because I think some of the benefits that you've seen on that are quite dramatic in terms of ability to scale.
Yeah, I mean, we've added advisors. Absolutely, we've had wonderful growth. From a resource perspective, we haven't had to add headcount, if you will, to be able to support the growth. What we have been focused on, though, is really, as I said, leveraging the system to kind of stick handle and clear based on our criteria, the common low risk type of trading activity, and really more so focus on, okay, we're growing the various business models, and having insights into, okay, what does the client base look like? Are there higher risk strategies or maybe products that we want to spend our time on? So really, it's more of evolution for us of continuing to have greater visibility into risk holistically, and leveraging the continuing to leverage the technology to help us see and identify and ultimately manage risk, and really work with our advisors using our two views into the same information, collectively.
Awesome. So Sean, I mean, I just get a chance to pivot over to you. So you advise an awful lot of number of firms. What kind of discussions are you having about technology with your customers?
That's a great question, and I think that the client-focused reforms, I think to most, if not all, in the industry have really been digested, in the sense that we're all thinking there's nothing new here. These rules don't necessarily create a catastrophic change for the industry. However, I think the anxiety that's being felt both by individual registrants as well as firms is the issue that Christina has raised, which is about scalability. There's a lot to do with these rules, which I would argue hasn't really changed over time, but I think the expectations are being ratcheted up. So technology is going to afford both the firm as a business operator and advisors as business owners to harness the power of what they are doing, and to take away the challenges that have typically plagued the industry in terms of how they show their work, how they paper their advice, and making that less of a challenge administratively. And ultimately, what that allows them to do, both firm and advisor, is to focus on their clients and enhance engagement. So technology really is going to help them, support them in showing their work, and it's going to help the firm in terms of being able to supervise more efficiently. And I think that's really what client-focused reforms are all about. In my opinion, there's really not a whole lot that has changed. There's in my opinion very little that's novel there, and significantly novel, but at the same time, well to do for the industry to have this guidance from our regulators who are doing a fantastic job in terms of trying to get clients to be engaged with what they're doing, because that really is what it's all about for me, is making sure the clients have that complete transparency, awareness of what they're getting into. That's no different than with any other professional. Your dentist, your doctor, they're very clear with what's about to happen. So I think that this just puts that, sets the table for us with that. So technology is our friend here.
I was going to ask. I mean, there's always this tension. I know we've had this in our practice runs, talking about the tension between the dealer and the advisor. And you worked on both sides. You sat in the seat, and you've worked as a consultant to firms. You know, is there a role for technology? That can it serve two masters? Can it
Yes.
bring these two distinct bodies together? Can you get alignment with it?
100%. As a business owner, I think the investment advisor needs to start embracing technology to support them, both in terms of their note taking and showing their work, as we talked about, but also in the worst case scenario, if there is a regulatory inquiry, or worse, if there's a client complaint that migrates through the firm's process and ultimately ends up in litigation. I have come across countless scenarios with clients where I ask a very simple question. So show me your notes, and there are none. And it's flabbergasting to the legal community that oftentimes note taking takes a back seat to the rendering of advice, and it's such a critical part of building your book of business and insulating it, hedging it. You always plan for you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst, and you never know when you're going to be coming back to an email or a note that you took on a file from many years ago. So technology can absolutely support the end business owner, the investment advisor, and 100% is going to support firm registrants in discharging their obligations to the regulator, but also their obligations to clients when they're no less immune to civil litigation or client complaints or regulatory inquiries than investment advisors are. So technology is our friend here. I think I'm somewhat agnostic when it comes to how do we do this, and I think the regulator is too. Their words quite clearly are, firms come in different shapes and sizes. You have to develop a system that works best for you. If that's a ratty old coiled notebook for an investment advisor, if that works for you, then go with that. It's a little more challenging, harder to supervise, a little old school, but I think nonetheless it works. If technology can make your practice more efficient, I think given the numbers that we're talking about, thousands of investment advisors, hundreds of thousands of trades, lots of inquiries, I think technology is the solution going forward.
So that's a great segue for you, Kaz, because we were talking a little bit about the preparation your organization did for CFRs, and there was quite an assessment done on all the workflows, and I'm sure that was no strange activity to many of the firms that are in our audience today. And I know the focus was on KYC, KYP, and the suitability workflows. What were some of the key insights, and how did this impact your thinking around decisions around implementing technology for CFRs, and specifically from a platform perspective?
Yeah, great question, Jeff, and thank you for having me today. We definitely, started out looking at this. What are the gaps in our CFR new enhanced obligations requirements? And what started out maybe initially as hey, let's focus on KYP, quickly grew to, how do we go beyond that? And having two platforms, be it MFDA and IROC platforms for our advisors, we also took the opportunity to say, we currently have a lot of tools and applications that are available, and do we need to somehow make this easier for our advisors to access any new tools or applications that are going to help them meet the new regulatory obligations or requirements in a more meaningful, efficient way? And so we stepped back and said, let's use this opportunity not only to put new tools into our advisors' hands to help them meet these enhanced obligations, but how do we improve the overall experience for our advisors? And we quickly started to see, we've got two different custodians and back offices that we use between our MFDA and IROC platform. We've got different point of sale fund fax delivery requirements. There's slight nuances in how we approach suitability based on the products available on each platform. Our forms were slightly different when it came to KYC, and we had to unbundle all of that to really see the big picture and where a platform could assist us with bringing all of this together to give better visibility, not only to compliance staff from ensuring our advisors are meeting their regulatory obligations, but giving better sight lines to our advisors in managing their blocks of business. And eventually, hopefully, getting to a point where we have a standardized, reliable, repeatable process for them that they're ticking their compliance requirements almost without even knowing they're doing it. That's what gives us comfort here. That was a key part in our decision making when we started to look at the different vendors, and obviously, coming to foureyes, we definitely saw the scalability. To talk and touch on what Christina said, in how we can utilize the data in a much more meaningful way that will help us streamline the processes that we're going to use for both, MFD and IROC advisors and our supervisory staff. To get them out of the weeds, so to speak. We don't want them just, focusing in on administrative, tick the boxes, didn't tick the boxes, initial this, initial that, or some of the prescriptive trade reviews that happen where there isn't risk because it is, again, something that technology today can help us filter and clear and allow our supervisory staff to focus on the more meaningful and higher risk areas where there really is a potential suitability or misalignment in the client's profile to their assets, not only at the account level, but at the client level.
Awesome. So we're getting a lot of questions coming in, and our team in St. John, New Brunswick has been filtering them. So I'm going to put this one out probably to Kaz and Christine to jump in on. And the question is really around reducing human touch on supervision. And the question is, thinking of MFDA Policy 2 and IROC Rule 3945, someone's got the rule book out, how do we get to more of an automated review with complicated exception escalations to humans? So maybe I'll put that to you, Christina, because you've been using our platform for a while. But I think this is part of our discussion about kind of thinking about taking on a platform approach to your data.
Yeah, I think a great question. I think I'll take a stab at it first. In terms of utilizing the system to handle more of an automated type review, I think that's what we're referring to when we mention leveraging the system to kind of systematically clear trades. I think it's in terms of, the exception capability of being able to program, what is it that we're going to determine is kind of okay or low risk type of trading activity. As Cass mentioned, it might be, a low risk transaction that's not going to anticipate, throwing an alignment issue between the client's profile and the actual portfolio suitability. And really, it's not turning a blind eye either. It's, you managing those exceptions, that exception data, and then utilizing the system reporting and integrity to be able to ensure that, okay, we're going to be relying on, automation, if you will, to a certain extent, but managing that aspect of your program and, having integrity checks on that. And then that way you're utilizing and programming the type of trading activity that you want to have your supervisors be alerted to and then ultimately question. Also, as well, to the two views, and this is what we mean by aligning, head office compliance staff with advisors, is having the same view into that exception flag that pops up, and having that portfolio view, the client view, the portfolio level, to say, okay, yeah, this trade actually, not in and of itself, but as it fits into the client's portfolio, has created an issue for the client that warrants a reevaluation, of the product suitability, or perhaps the client circumstances. So it's for sure leveraging the technology to perform that kind of common function in an automated way, but still having visibility to what has occurred, and then actually using human effort based on your review criteria, based on your business model that you want to have presented to the supervisors. And again, it's really as build as you design. How it presents is really in a dashboard setting with various tiles. So I might want to have a tile that looks at suitability alignment between the portfolio risk and the client's risk. I might want to have a tile that actually is giving me, client priority type issues, or I want to have a tile that specifically is isolating large transactions, or I might want to have a tile that's AML specific. So it really is customizable, based on your business model and really what you define as your greater areas of risk in your business that you would like to have, the human judgment and compliance professionals apply their judgment to.
Thank you for that. So Sean, we got more questions coming in here, so I think we're gonna maybe go a little bit off script.
Okay.
And
My favorite.
so good luck here, and we're going to be mindful of time because we do have a couple of good questions coming up that we plan for. But one of the questions was about scalability, and I guess the comment is about firms are kind of waiting to see how regulators will assess our implementation of CFRs. But let's just call it regulatory change, because we know that this is not the only change that's happening. There's more on the books. And specific to Sean's comments, is there not anything substantially new to the CFRs? Or is this all about ability for a dealer and an advisor to scale and demonstrate their work, and maybe kind of extrapolate on that? Because you talk about this all the time about 90% of the issues that advisors and dealers deal with have to do with note taking.
Right. So I think if we took this back to first principles, and I walked up to the average investment advisor on public transportation and said, "Hey, have you heard of this concept called KYC, or Know Your Client?" They would probably say, "Yes, I've heard of that." And same thing with suitability, and same thing with Know Your Product, and same thing with conflicts of interest. So generally speaking, my approach on client-focused reforms has been, there's not a whole lot that's novel here. I personally took great interest in the changes that dealt with misleading communications, which I think are fantastic, and we could probably spend 5 hours talking about those. But I think, for me, what I took away from this is tightening the screws. The rules are becoming much clearer. And I think, when you read case law, I think a judge might say, these are what the rules have always been. We've always had KYC. We've always had suitability. We've always had Know Your Product. They're just becoming clearer now. And I think the expectations are I wouldn't say identical, because people get freaked out with certainty. So I can't say with certainty that they're identical, because really they're not. But I think the approach is as I've said, Know Your Product is not new. IROC has had a Know Your Product rule for 10 years. Know Your Client is certainly not new. Same thing with suitability. We're tweaking them. We're making them far more precise in terms of what is expected. And I think that's causing some heartburn. The question that I've been asked, are you telling me that I have to do a suitability determination for every single investment action? A lot of clients have asked me that. And the way I've interpreted the rules is, yes, you do. And that is probably what you should have been doing if you weren't doing it already. Why would you not do a suitability determination? Why would you not consider suitability for each investment action? So the other, clue that I use in chatting with folks is that, look, IROC passed a lot of these amendments without a consultation period. And they were non non-substantive amendments, tweaks, and rightly so, because I think their rule book was on point. So if I digest all that, what do I think client-focused reforms are about? Well, partly they're about enforcement. I think it's a far, and that's the end of the field that I play in often, is dealing with customer complaints, litigation, and going through that process when it's too late. So, if I look at these rules and they're becoming more and more clear in terms of what someone, a regulator, is expecting of its regulated population, geez, this feels like their enforcement actions are going to become a whole lot easier for them. And I am all for that. Because if this isn't the air that people are breathing already, when I say people, I mean registrants, then you don't belong in this industry. And if I have to explain to you the concept of self-preservation, which is really note-taking, I think you really need to have your head examined if you're not taking care to take care of your business, which in so doing will lead to better results with a client and your firm. So all of this makes perfect sense to me. If we can achieve that without losing our collective minds through a scalable technological solution, then fabulous. Personally, again, if you want a notebook, use a notebook. Do whatever works for you. Technology, I think, is the future, given the volume that we're talking about. Think of what Christina said. We've gone to 350 advisors. Like, that's a lot of trades to process. That's a lot of thinking to do. And if we can make that easier for people and ensure their book of business, and we render a better result for clients, like, what am I missing here? So again, that's the common sense approach I've taken. And sometimes when you sit down with a registrant, with an investment advisor, and say, so, have you heard of this novel concept called Know Your Client? And they stare at you thinking, why are you asking me this question? Well, because, people are wondering what's changed, and yeah, there have been some tweaks and so on, but basic principles are still the same.
Awesome. So
hope I don't get in trouble for that.
So, well,
too late.
Get in trouble
Too
for
bad.
That. So we've got about 4 minutes before I want to keep this train on schedule, and I know Kendall's in the back room going to come and join us, and we'll have a discussion about the platform. But I'm going to draw Christine and Cass into the discussion here for the last 4 minutes. And we've been talking about a platform, but it's also interesting is, even though we're on an early journey with your team, Cass, and we've been on a longer journey with yours, Christina, is the whole concept of building a roadmap off of this and beyond, call it the siloed function of doing a suitability oversight, but bringing data together to drive new workflows. So, Cass, maybe you've been starting to do some thinking around how do you bring KYC maintenance and material change, non-material change into, call it a common flow between yourselves as approvers of KYC changes to the back office, but certainly from how advisors engage clients digitally, because this is kind of the talk track. Your organizations are really starting to think down the road about how you start pulling these things together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is something that, again, when we looked at this, we looked at what have been the advisor pain points leading up to this. There was a lot of angst around client-focused reforms, and there still is, because they're in their mind, this is change. But to Sean's point and Christina's, there's nothing net new here. There's codification of the requirements now, which to some degree makes it easier for compliance staff to enforce, but is viewed by advisors as this is something new, more paperwork, another compliance exercise. But when we look at the platform and the functionality, and Christina touched on this, is creating these alerts. We have the ability to create these alerts for advisors, is where I really see a big benefit from some of the other platforms that we've been using to date, where, if we can have information present to our advisors upfront in a meaningful way to say, here's your accounts that are offside of the 3-year KYC rule for retail clients, or 12 months for our PMs on our IROC platform. This now lets them segment their block of business and approach how they engage with clients differently. If they can quickly go into a tool and they're meeting with a client and see, hey, this account has already potentially been thrown offside because of market, volatility. I may need to rebalance. What is this new money coming in going to look like if I put it in? And again, help them make decisions about making sound and recommendations that align with the client profile in advance of placing the order. That's going to eliminate inquiries on the back end. And we create efficiencies by that, because now, again, supervisory staff aren't required to issue those disruptive inquiries to advisors as we hear about them. And we've armed our advisors for success. And in doing so, we've also got audit trails happening, that all of this is happening in behind the scenes, especially when we link, an integrated investor questionnaire with the KYC monitoring, with the KYP attestation, and ability to issue fund facts, all out of one platform where an advisor can readily retrieve and demonstrate that they've met all of these new enhanced obligations. And from a supervisory standpoint, because we're operating on the same system and platform, we can see that they're meeting those obligations. And it also becomes a lot easier when we issue an inquiry and we say, well, I'm seeing this, and an advisor brings up the account. They're looking at the exact same thing. Things are connected much more easier. There is no disconnect between, well, I don't see that, I'm looking at the client level versus just the account level. We've got a lot more efficiency and transparency. It allows our advisors, we feel, to exercise their professional judgment in a better way, that we as supervisory staff can also now see and fill in the gaps more readily when we have that integration with, note taking and attestations happening in the same platform.
Awesome. So Christine, I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes, and I'm going to make sure we wrap this up by within 46 minutes. So we got Kendall backstage, but you've let the cat out of the bag on 2 items. So maybe you could talk a little bit about pre-trade suitability. This is your roadmap. Your organization's been talking about this publicly, but that ties into Kaz's last comments about how do you start putting compliance into the practice. And that starts with that alignment around RTQ score. And I'm not sure if the audience is aware, but we've been working with some organizations to take that from the standard low, medium, high scale to 0 to 100 to reflect a client risk score. And now you're drawing this back to the portfolio, or call it the account level suitability. So I'm going to turn it over to you, maybe give you 2 minutes to kind of talk about this teaser about where you're going with your roadmap.
Yeah, and I think Cass made some really, really important points in what he covered there just now. And I think really what this boils down to is, again, the bringing the views, the head office compliance advisor, and again, ultimately the client view into risk. It's about managing risk proactively, and also as well too, that creates, we talk about bandwidth within our compliance professionals, but it's creating bandwidth within our advisors' practice, within their team practices, which ultimately benefits the end client, right? So in terms of creating efficiencies in their practice through the technology and having processes that digitally are collecting, analyzing, storing KYC information, product information, doing our KYP product analysis, our recommending delivery, as Cass mentioned, everything being digitally recorded in terms of us being able to show our work, and then ultimately suitability of our actions and having a common view of that, that really does create efficiencies within head office, but as well as, and importantly, within our advisors' practices, so that they have more time to grow their businesses, and also, most importantly, spend more time, meaningful time with their clients. So I think that's really important to highlight. And as it relates to proactively, managing risk, the pre-trade analyzing tool, pre-trade analyzer, I think is what we refer to it as. We're looking at incorporating that into the process. So the KYC, KYP suitability process. And when an advisor, goes through the analysis of KYP, does the peer product comparisons, I've selected this product, I've selected this product because all of that is memorialized. Before I'm going to go, our advisors are going to go and actually execute that trade, having the ability to utilize their view into the client's portfolio and into the data to say, how does this actual trade affect the client's overall portfolio? How is this trade going to fit? Is it going to fit into the portfolio the way that I'm mapping, the way that I intend for it to? And that's going to be very powerful for a number of reasons. It provides, puts more power into the advisor's hands to be able to, have that holistic view before taking the action, and as well as, ultimately, from a compliance perspective, we're not really looking at that from a post-trade perspective anymore, systematically through automation or even through our human analysis through tile exceptions, because the advisor will have the ability and the power to be able to see that. Often, what we find, just doing the job and doing post-trade, and you identify an item, you work with the advisor, it's like, this got flagged, but help us understand it more. Oh, okay, yeah, there is a reasonable answer to solve the inquiry. And so I think it puts us more into a proactive state than a reactive state, where that time could be spent better utilized.
Great. So thank you for that. I want to thank our panelists. We may run about 3 minutes over, but hopefully you can stick around. I think we've provided a little bit of a teaser and just barely touched the surface of this topic. Some of the key takeaways today: the importance of data, and particularly a single source of truth that can help scale your compliance program. The importance of creating a common view for conversations around risk and suitability between the dealer and the advisor, and how a platform approach can help break down the silos of data in the organization and drive operational efficiencies. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kendall McMenamin. Kendall is the CTO and product visionary at Foureyes Financial. To the discussion, Kendall will provide some key highlights of the Risk7 intelligent compliance platform. Our panelists are going to stick around. They may ask a couple of questions, and I'll turn it over to you, Kendall. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. Before I jump in, I'm going to do a little show and tell of our platform. But before I do that, I thought I'd just talk about what we built. And what we have built is, we call it our intelligent compliance platform. And I think it's worth sharing that it's one platform, and depending on your role and who you are, you get a different view into that world. So for example, everyone sort of says to us, what does Foureyes mean? Well, in our world, it's the head office view, as Christina's talked about. It's the advisor view. It's the client view through our discovery zone for prospecting and clients. And it's a regulator view, and giving that regulator the chance to log in and do their audits proactively that way. This platform is based on a number of modules. So like I said, it's one common platform, and depending on the modules you subscribe to, different menus will appear and come to life on the screen for you. And that's really enabled through our feature flags that we have in the back end. We've had clients and prospects both ask, well, what if I don't subscribe to your digital onboarding, but I want it later? We deploy the same application to all of our clients, and depending on what they subscribe to, we turn off or on those modules. So if you decided you wanted onboarding later on, we did enable that module, and of course we do our DocuSign integration or your e-sign integration. But it's one platform. It's the same platform deployed to all customers. All modules are there. We don't do custom per se. We just roll out new features that everyone gets access to, and we enable it by turning off and on the feature flags. And some of the high levels within the platform is our surveillance and suitability tool, Risk7. Our advisor tools sort of fall in that Risk4 world, and Christina and Cass both talked about those. We have our digital onboarding, which is our account opening and account updates, and we have our KYC, KYP updates in there. So we are releasing this month here, being able to do material, non-material changes through the platform digitally. We have our risk profiler built into our platform, as Jeff talked about and Christina talked about, and that's how we're aligning that sort of profile score to the actual portfolio score. Inside of our platform as well, we do have a risk ratings algorithm we've developed, and which enables us to get to that sort of base 100 value for rating securities to tie back to the portfolio. And key to all this as well is having good case management or inquiry management, communication tools to track with the advisor. So we have case built within our platform as well. And I'll probably finish off before I jump into saying, we are a data first company, and we believe the data powers the workflow. So whether you're using our onboarding solution or a third party's onboarding solution, we do have one client that's not using our onboarding, but using another vendor. we've integrated to grab that data to pull it back in. So as Christina talked about, it's about having access to that data that you can layer on the workflows and get that true experience and enable scalability in there. So you can use our platform together, or you can use it with our platform and other vendors. We'll ingest that data into our schema and it will power going forward.